Hello, this is Keith Gerson. I am your moderator for today's session, part 2, how to effectively use social media to achieve your best franchise sales. As a preamble to today's session, I want to point out that we actually put on a webinar on this topic a couple of weeks ago, and it was our most engaged audience ever. In total, we had nearly 100 questions that were posed to the audience, and despite our best efforts, we weren't able to get to them. So this time around, it's going to be less talk and more rock, so to speak, when it comes to leading up to the actual questions. For today's session, it is being recorded, and we're going to get to every bit as many of the questions as we can. And this time around, if there's even more questions coming in, we will go ahead and put out a blog with answers to the balance of those questions. So without further ado, let us jump in with approximately 300 registrants for today's webinar. This remains a very, very hot topic. As it relates to housekeeping, hopefully everybody can see the slide that I'm sharing. The first question we always get is, will this session be recorded? And yes, it will. You are muted, but if you do have a question, please put it in on the Q&A panel, which is basically on the, oh, there, somebody just popped with a Q&A question. Is the last seminar available for listening? It certainly is. If you go to FranConnect.com and go to the resource section of the page, you'll see all of our webinars up there, and just by putting in your name and email address, you'll have instant access to it. All right, so good question, thanks. And chat is also available for talk amongst yourselves, but Q&A for the panelists. A little bit about FranConnect, very little, just to say that we cover pretty much solutions across the entirety of the franchise life cycle. Today's session, we're focusing on develop. And normally in our develop modules, you would find franchise sales for maximizing your sales closing effectiveness. And you would find a opener for the onboarding process. And in the last 2 years, we introduced artificial intelligence with a sales accelerator. So this is an audience primarily made up of development people, executives, and marketers. And we're thrilled you've joined us. And if you don't know about FranConnect, we have over 900 franchise brands utilizing our system. For those of you in development, we saw last year over 11,000 franchises that were sold that came through our system. So we cover, like I said, stem to stern. Well, I'm thrilled to reintroduce you to our panelists today. So as they're turning on their cameras and just going in the order again, I'm Keith Gerson, President of Franchise Operations. And I'm just the guy that's going to be moderating the questions, but the brilliance is that of our attendees. First, Sean, would you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, I'm Sean Fitzgerald, obviously president of True Blue Total House Care. We have about close to 90 locations, home service, but we're part of Strategic Franchise Systems. And so we have 4 other brands, and collectively we have about 700 locations. And so I oversee one of the brands, but also help out with lead generation and franchise development for the entire organization. So love this topic.
Awesome. And you've got a lot of great experience on this topic, which I'm glad we're going to be sharing here momentarily. Next, I'd like to introduce my friend, Jennifer Campbell. Jen, please introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me, Keith. Good to be here again. I'm Jen Campbell, president and partner of Hot Dish Advertising. I oversee account strategy across many of our client accounts and have been in franchising now for 23 years. So lots of experience across about 500 franchise brands at our agency. So happy to share some insights on this very popular topic, as you said.
How does someone who looks 24 put in 23 years in franchise? That's
Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome, Jen. And then we have Tim Weiderhoff. Tim, would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning, Keith. Thanks for having me. My name is Tim Weiderhoff. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Wow Wow Hawaiian Lemonade. We are a quick service restaurant emerging brand. Let's see, we're founded in Hawaii, hence the name. And we've just opened our 17th location a month and a half ago. And I'm excited to be here. This is a very fun topic.
Excellent. Well, so glad to have each of you here. And we're going to go in, as I mentioned, we have a great size audience with lots of expertise that they brought the last time around, asking also some amazing questions. So I'd like to say in our previous webinar, we learned through polling that 27% of respondents said that they are devoting 21 to 50% of their budgets to social media. We had 21% who were spending 10 to 20% and 14% that are devoting over 50% of their budgets to social media. So even though I've got all of this expertise in the panel, clearly everybody has figured out that social media has for some time now turned the corner in terms of being a very viable source of leads that become sales. When I asked the audience in the poll, what are your lead to close ratios for social media ads? I heard that the following, less than 100 to 1 ratios were brought up, 100 to 199 for lead to deal, and 200 to 299. And we saw some really strong results in terms of people that were indicating, by and large, that they were falling between that 200 and the 299 level for lead to deal, which is significantly better than what we typically have seen in social, which has been 0.3% in years past. And then we also asked, are you using LinkedIn and finding it successful, yes or no? And we found out that people are using predominantly Facebook more than any other source. And I believe that it was 63% that said that they're using LinkedIn, and then a lesser percent ranking third as Instagram. So we're going to go into today's polling just to make sure everybody is engaged here. And I'm going to put up the first question here. And we're going to go here again to check the audience because it is made up of same and also some new members. So as I'm looking at the results before I launch the results, we're finding quite a few people that are identifying that they don't know. So while I'm just waiting for these to come in, can you please tell me, Sean, starting with you, how do you track your lead to close ratios for social media ads?
Yeah, so I think it's not an exact science. I'm going to start with that. There is the ability to track, last touch, meaning that they were on a social media ad, they went to our website, and then they inquired. So that's relatively easy to track. There's also, the pixel tracking. So if they come back later, that there's a ability to track that. But if they use different devices and so forth, it's maybe not as easy to. Now, the other thing I'll also say is that utilizing social media from a lead generation standpoint is very top funnel. So you're engaging people maybe for the first time to your brand, to franchising. So that behavior of a candidate is going to be a lot different than somebody who's been researching for a franchise for a long time and then inquires about a franchise opportunity. So from that perspective, we look at it twofold: the direct correlation, but also I like to look at analytics to see if that content or those ads are driving traffic to our website and the engagement level or the time on the site. So we look at multiple things from that perspective.
Those are great insights. And are you able to see the results of the polling?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So as we can see here, the number one response at 52% is I don't know. And to Sean's point, and when it comes to KPIs, this is one of the most critical KPIs that you should be paying attention to, especially given the very high percentage of you that are investing. We find in second position, 100 to 199 leads is equaling a deal. That's 15%. That's terrific. 300 to 1 at 13%, and very different this time around, in which only 7% are reporting 200 to 299 equals one deal. Let's move to the next polling question. And that question is, are you using LinkedIn and finding it successful? And I'm going to turn to you now, Tim. I'm curious, Tim, have you any experience in using LinkedIn in your campaigns?
Yeah, for our personal choice from a strategy standpoint was to not go with LinkedIn for a couple of reasons. One, the cost and the spend versus the production of the algorithms just wasn't really quite there yet. We didn't have the same level of ability as we do on Facebook. And I think I jokingly mentioned on the last webinar, I constantly personally get feeds from sales folks. So I can attest as a non-interested party that the algorithm is not very solid. So I always joke back, I'll buy one of yours if you buy one of mine. I have not found that to be very successful.
And Jen, do you have any insights as it relates to your clients? I know that you do a lot on Facebook, but what is the type of brand that you work with that finds that LinkedIn is effective?
Well, I think it certainly comes down to audience. So if you have a buyer that is potentially, coming from corporate America and they've previously used it inside of their career and more active on LinkedIn, you're going to see greater success than somebody who is not active. So if it's somebody in the trades, they're probably out in the street, feet on the street, and not in LinkedIn every day. So I think it's a matter of audience specificity. And then also it's a great channel to recruit from, if you think about it from an organic standpoint versus maybe paid, where you're looking for individuals and mining for them. So I think have to be careful on how you use it, because Tim's right, the cost per lead is much higher and it's not for every brand.
And if I could add, Keith, to something Jen said there that was really, really good, which is the ability for you to drive organic growth, though, is still very important. One thing I want to make sure I'm clear when my answer is, although I've not found it successful for LinkedIn on the paid side, it is still a channel that should be utilized to talk about your brand. Like as an example, my franchise development director talks a lot about franchising. And if you have questions, engage me. But he doesn't go and hit heavy sales, but organic growth. And so having a presence is absolutely important. It's the paid I have not found to be successful.
Yeah, Keith, I would like to jump in. I agree with Tim wholeheartedly on that, is that the paid side with LinkedIn is could be more challenging than traditional other social media channels. But to Tim's point, that doesn't mean it's a great vehicle to use from an organic standpoint. And so all of our sales team have a LinkedIn profile. And believe me, your candidates are looking at your LinkedIn profile, if not connecting and following. And so we use that as a channel for announcements. And there's no better way to say, great things about the brand, activity, all that stuff are what the candidates want to see and hear to affirm that they're looking at the right opportunity. So being able to post those and reshare articles, content is a great use for LinkedIn.
Scott Nichols also points out that this really is a two-part question. This isn't, are you using LinkedIn, as much as it is, and finding it successful. So we are finding that 48% of those that took the poll were indicating that they are seeing success, and 52% are saying that they don't. Though somebody else here, Ed, mentions they're mining for leads with future hopes, but not really getting leads quite yet. And Sam Spector also had a question for us by paid. Are the panel members referring to LinkedIn mining? Jen, can you speak to that?
Sorry, I missed the question specifically about mining because I wasn't quite following. I'm sorry.
Would we use the word paid? Are the panel members referring to LinkedIn mining is what you're paying for?
Oh, not necessarily. You can pay to have an account on Sales Navigator, which would be a way to mine, and it gives you more control over finding specific titles and creating, I guess, essentially buckets of individuals that you're mining after under different titles potentially, or companies maybe. But other than that, the paid side usually is from an ad, and there's different ad sets that you can use specific to that channel.
Thank you, Jen. So third and last polling question, and then we're going to just get into the heart of things here is, how do you manage your social media and franchise development marketing? And the answers are: my franchise development team handles it, our internal marketing department handles it, or we utilize an outside marketing agency. Please choose the one that is most representative of what's going on within your franchise brands, please. And as we're looking at the horse race here to see who's ahead, right now we have an internal marketing department that most are using, followed by an outside marketing agency, and most would say that they do not have a franchise development team handling their own marketing efforts as it relates to managing social media and franchise development marketing, as it should be. So I'm going to end the poll here. And again, we can see 48% are turning to their internal marketing department. So that's very, very good to see. 38% outside and 14% the franchise development team. So,
hey Keith, the one question I would ask too is that internal marketing department your consumer marketing? And as we know, and we talked on the previous one, is that consumer marketing and franchise development marketing are completely separate animals. And a lot of times I see brands make the mistake that they just hand it over to the consumer side and they use consumer tactics to help with development. And that's not necessarily a winning formula. Or they use an outside agency that may be phenomenal with consumer social and advertising, but they all say, oh yeah, we can do Fran Dev. And it is, again, a completely different animal. So I think it's understanding that who your audience is and who your target audience is and what those talking points are going to be and the messaging and everything else that goes with it. So I think that is a key component.
That's a good insight. You know, I also have found historically, though, that the internal marketing departments are oftentimes funded through the franchise brand or ad fund. And there's this general sense of separation between church and state. And a lot of franchise development team members I know, you know, it's not that they're complaining, but it's just the stark reality that they don't feel like they're getting the support that they need, which is where and why it's very justifiable to think in terms of agencies such as Jen Campbell's agency at Hot Dish Marketing that are devoted to this very topic. And even though, and I'll ask you, Jen, do marketing agencies typically split the responsibilities, to Sean's point, between those that work on consumer marketing and those that work on franchise lead generation?
I would say most agencies don't necessarily, just because they assign a team based off of the account and not necessarily by the sides of the business, but that doesn't mean everybody does. I do agree with Sean is that we probably get the most inquiries when people say, well, we've tried it with our agency over and over and over, and I kept having to push it back because it wasn't right. And I knew it wasn't right. And because of that, we're now here talking because they reach out to us because they're like, I just need somebody who gets franchise development. So typically it needs, to Sean's point, it's a different animal.
Yep. And a question came in from Sean Erickson. Do you have a separate Facebook page for your franchising for lead generation from your customer-based corporate page? So I'll turn to Tim first and then to Sean. Do you have a separate Facebook?
So I would say that's a slightly tricky question because it's not that I have separate Facebook accounts, but I have separate campaign managers on how we attack that. And that's because, to Sean's point, the audience is completely different from my customer acquisition to my franchisee acquisition. So you don't want to have a bunch, at least this is my opinion, I don't want to have a bunch of different pages because I want continuity around the brand. And keep in mind that even when you're attacking the franchise candidate, they're looking at all aspects of your brand. So you need to have that continuity across the board. So I don't like having multiple pages, but multiple campaigns and different campaign managers are definitely, so on the back end is definitely important.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Sean, do you have anything else that you would add in terms of a best practice on this point?
I think Tim's point is really good. I think it's really looking at those channels and how you're going to use them. And if you're going to do regular posts on, let's franchise development, right? Whether it's new franchisees on coming on board, that type of stuff, versus straight consumer, because then you'll get conflicting weird messages on your channel. So if you're not posting franchise development messaging, then just use your consumer, because that's going to be more engaged. Most people the consumer is more likely to follow you on your consumer side versus a franchise development candidate is going to follow your social media development page. So I think it's good that it's okay to do either one, but the campaigns should be completely different. And it really comes down to how do you use those channels. And I think that's another thing I think we talked on the last panel, which I think is really important, is we look at social media as if you're on it, that's it. Like, does it work or does it not work? It's a channel. And the question is, how effective are you using it? And then what kind of content are you creating? Is it engaging? Is it pulling people through? And you look at that as much as the channel. And I think a lot of times people just go, well, we tried LinkedIn or tried Facebook, it didn't work. Well, there's much more to it than just the channel. And so it's, what was your campaigns? Who was your target audience? How well effective was it? It's much more complex than that. This is not like a franchise portal where you put your information on there and you get leads. So I think understanding that is a real key to this. So
yeah, I'll just add to that in that, think of social as a drip campaign. Like, people are on social, and if you're always seeing the brand, it's almost like I'm dripping another message in front of you that isn't overtly franchise development, but at least it's top of mind awareness. So it's just another way to kind of think about the activity that you do both organically and paid.
Yeah, that's a great point. Last time around, we ended with golden nuggets for the audience. So I'm just going to go through these really quick, show a very abbreviated version of the case study in which Hot Dish and Wow Wow Hawaiian Lemonades collaborated and came up with quite a winning strategy. So really quick, we said that you need to use a multi-layered approach and not to put all your eggs in one basket. And Jen, I think that was really attributed to you last time around. Would you just give a little more life to that?
Yeah, I think like Sean mentioned, some people just think that Facebook, I'm going to be on Facebook and instantly that's going to create all of my lead generation that I need. And ultimately, it's just one part of the mix. And depending on budget, you need to have additional budget and audience, need to have additional layers in your campaign to drive awareness first. And then once I've considered the business, how do I drive them down to the website to be able to learn more and hopefully convert as a lead? So we just definitely want to make sure you're thinking about it as one part of the mix.
Thank you, Jen. And then the second bullet point, I believe, was attributed to you, Sean. I remember you speaking to lookalike audiences, but to effectively target on Facebook and other sites, what do you mean when you say the key is to create a lookalike audience?
Yeah, so again, as a channel, if you think about social media, people are on it for entertainment, for primarily entertainment. And so no one wants to be all of a sudden hit with a bunch of salesy content. And so part of that is that you got to get people engaged. And the best way to get people engaged is provide content that is meaningful to them. And one thing that's meaningful to them is other people like themselves. So be able to do lookalike campaigns where you have a franchisee that comes on board that was a school teacher, and you do an article or content about how a school teacher now is a franchisee and loves life. And then you can actually try to target other school teachers or people who have a similar interest. That's just one example of a lookalike campaign, because they're going to be more likely to be engaged if they see something that somebody is doing that they perceive or see as like very similar to them, and it could be very engaging. So that's creating lookalike campaigns, which Facebook allows you to do it from a demographic standpoint. But I like to do it more from a background standpoint and then kind of really target from that perspective, because we've seen much better results from that. The other thing that's great about it too is that we all want to emulate our great franchisees. So a good place to start is take your top owners and find out what their backgrounds and interests are and try to find people like that. So I think there's a lot of creative and strategy behind a lot of these campaigns. And then you start with who you want to target, who you want to emulate, and you work your way, your cascading message down, and then selecting the right social channels for that.
Beautiful. Facebook is deemed franchising as an employment type of ad. Jen, I'd like you to speak to this for a moment, and then any of the panelists can add to this. But you shared with the audience that ads are getting rejected because of the fact that this is being deemed one of the employment categories.
Yeah.
So what does one do about that?
Well, essentially, you'll find yourself having to upload your ads multiple times. What we advise our clients is, first, don't accept the employment category, because that's what Facebook will want you to do because of how they're deeming franchising currently. And just because of the joint employer laws, you don't want to get tangled up in that. And so then specifically, once you go to essentially launch your campaigns, you will put them out for approval, because Facebook has to approve every ad that goes live before it goes live. And you'll see them being rejected. And the key is to just keep resubmitting them, because they will eventually go through depending on who's reviewing them. And we find that after there's different iOS updates and things like that, there tends to be a higher propensity to being rejected, and then it kind of tapers off and then it heightens again, but it doesn't mean it goes away. It's just a part of the business today, quite frankly. And then the other thing you could do is work on, trying to, by the content you use, to make sure it's very clear that it's a franchise and a business, not like join our company, because it could sound like it's employment.
Yeah, thank you. And then Tim, on this next point, social media is a channel like any advertising channel. It boils down to messaging, content, matching to the right channel. You partnered with Hot Dish in this particular use case we're about to go into. What did you learn in terms of refining and perfecting, if you will, the right messaging to the right people at the right time?
Yeah, I mean, and that's really the key. And I think, Sean made some really good points earlier in regards to your audience. And I think when we first started, it really boiled down to having a good correlation between the channel to the audience that's there, right? So we've heard already commentary about, what's the purpose of someone going on to social media? Usually it's to connect, it's to have a little bit of fun. I think there's some statistics out there that, someone visits a social media channel multiple times through the day, right? They only check their email maybe, I don't know, if they're not in their office in their desk a few times a day, but they're checking Facebook or Instagram 10 times that amount. So understanding, one, what the channel does, what's the purpose of the channel, how much time do you have, and then matching the appropriate audience to that channel. I think there was a comment earlier about, well, I've tried Facebook and it just didn't work. You don't, in today's day and age, looking at any one channel and saying this doesn't work, so I'm not going to do it, really can be detrimental for you. As Sean mentioned earlier, this is not a franchising portal where you just stick your stuff up there and watch things trickle in. You've got to constantly be working at it and updating your messaging and updating your creative is critical. Simple things like rotating out pictures, having multiple different ways that you're attacking that channel you want it to be as fresh as possible.
Now, Tim, you're an emerging brand. Remind the audience how many locations you have today.
Yeah, we just opened our 17th.
Yeah, nice. Now, a lot of people are in the audience probably wondering, how did you make the use case to reach outside of the own internal skill set, or maybe the lack of these skill sets of marketing here, to be able to afford an agency to work for you?
Well, that's the key, right? When you're first starting, it's what can you afford? What can you do, right? we made the concerted efforts to recognize that, we had to have we had to spend some money if we were going to make some money. I've been very fortunate to meet Don Kane, Jen's partner, at an IFA event, which I can't stress enough for emerging brands. The more events that you can go to and the more people you can meet, franchising is a very large but small family. It's amazing how many of us are all intertwined in some story, one way or another. So I think finding that partner was a really critical piece, and networking to get to that was big. And at the end of the day, I think Sean mentioned it earlier, consumer versus franchise development, very, very different animals. And, there was plenty of use cases and reasons that gave me a lot of confidence as to why I chose Hot Dish. And as we get into the results, I think you'll see that it's paid off tremendously for us.
Yes. Now, I reviewed this last time around with Jen and Tim kind of walking us through. I'm going to skip strategy for a moment. Okay. And I'm going to go directly to, if you will, the utilization, the various tools that you used. And it's definitely omni-channel, and it's different strokes for not only different folks, but different strokes for same folks. So Jen, would you just give us an idea of what we're looking at here in terms of the 360 review of what was utilized?
Yeah, for sure. So we essentially created a multi-channel campaign for WOW, but more specifically tried to capitalize on showcasing the brand itself. And you can see with the photography and imagery, so it really pops and you're looking at a WOW ad, but the messaging is very specific to franchise lead generation. And we did it across our social campaign, where some of the images were animated. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner where we show the front of a store. Believe it or not, storefronts work really well in franchise lead generation. So there's a nugget for any of you at the storefront. And from there, we also created very specific ads that showcase the market that Tim was looking to grow in. And we changed those out. So as they sell a market, then the creative is simply changed out and we start our targeting all over again in a new market. So very deliberate in helping to support their growth where they want to have franchisees. And then we extended that campaign across our e-blast newsletter and of course the website, so that when they land on the website, the payoff is like, well, what does this business mean to me? And does it look like to be a WOW owner?
Yeah.
And if I could add, Keith, to that, one of the things that Jen and team did a phenomenal job at that I was really proud of is if you look at that top left corner, we got very specific into where we targeted. So you mentioned it on the previous slide, how did I afford this as an emerging brand? Well, my strategy with WOW was definitely different than my previous role, which was Vice President of Franchise Development with Massage Envy, where I had 1,200 locations, 10 times the budget, that kind of thing. So if I was looking to infill at Massage Envy, I might splatter dollars across an entire DMA. However, with WOW, I needed to have my money stretched. So instead of marketing or advertising to a DMA, I chose actual cities. So, and I didn't choose cities based off of necessarily highest population or the slam dunk, the Dallases or the Los Angeles, San Francisco, those types of places. We found great luck in Fresno. We found great luck in Salt Lake City. Las Vegas is, friendly, is jokingly called the ninth island. So we knew we had to get there. And with serving very specific ads that were tailored to that consumer or to that franchise candidate there in that city, we sold out Las Vegas relatively quickly.
That's terrific. Mike Long in the audience was, this is kind of a kiss and tell, Tim, up to you. What type of budget for this type of program? Are you willing to speak to that?
Yeah, well, I'll start it with the end in mind, right? Which was, what were we looking to achieve, right? So having that goal of how many licenses that I needed to achieve in a year was very important for me to then build what would it look like to get to that number and start with that dollar amount. The reason I would look at it that way is then, depending on how well you're cooking, you might add a little bit of gas to speed things up a little bit and to find that it's worth looking for that additional investment to get into. I will say I started out smaller. I started out with a paid budget of around $4,000 a month, increased that up to $8,000 a month. So my paid budget was $8,000 a month over 24 months. And as you'll see on the next slide, we did 59 deals. So I think if any emerging brand was able to say, hey, I would pay $3,250 for a franchise agreement, I don't think there's anybody on this call that wouldn't say yes to that.
Thanks.
Especially if you use brokers.
Yes.
And that's what we're showing right now is the results. And yeah, to your point, I mean, the ROI is undisputable here. You know, Q3 of 2022, 17 open locations and a pipeline of 42 sold out in several markets. Cost per lead of $100. Percentage of qualified leads, 35% is mind-boggling. Resulting, as Tim just said, in the sale of 59 franchises sold over a 24-month period. So congratulations. That's clearly money very well spent.
Yeah, we're fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of smart people and then just get out of the way.
Yeah. Amen to that. I'm going to stop sharing just so we can focus on you all more and go directly into the questions right now. So we're going to break these down by categories. These, and you can still keep asking your questions in the Q&A portion, please. But here's the questions that we carried over from last time around. KPIs was one of the first categories where I've grouped them here. Should Facebook lead attribution be measured against how many folks go to your website from there versus just becoming a lead? Facebook beats most portals was a commentary that we got there. So should it be measured against how many folks go to your website versus just becoming a lead? And let me go directly to you, Sean, on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, like earlier, it's not always easy to track. So for us, our number one source for deals is our website. And so we drive traffic to our website utilizing social media and PPC. PPC is really easy to track. The social piece isn't. So it's kind of, you can draw your conclusions from it that we know that, our goal on our development team is to get as many people to our website to inquire because we know that that's going to be the best success path for us. And so that's what we kind of track it and look at it from that standpoint. So, like I said earlier, we have the direct correlation of like kind of last touch approach, but there's also pulling that out and looking at overall analytics, lead generation through website leads is what we're really kind of focusing on.
Very good.
I'll just add to that. I mean, really the idea is that Facebook will generate traffic to your site. And when you get them to the site, then you can remarket to them so that you're in front of them for a while. So just know that impressions and traffic to the site, even if they don't convert right away, is really important. So it's top of mind for when they are ready to make a decision to inquire.
Yeah, and that goes back to the previous conversation about, how people learn about your brand, and social is very top funnel. So it may be the first time they're exposed to your brand, exposed to franchising. They're not likely to go and fill out your inquiry form and schedule a call with your development person. So that nurturing campaign, that cascading messaging, I think is key. And what better way to do it than utilizing social to get traffic and then engage them in remarketing campaigns, which can be the most effective source for increase in deals as well.
I'm going to field a question that just came in from Kristen. With the 35% qualified leads, this is for you, Tim or Jen. What do you define as a qualified lead?
Well, for us, I'm looking at their financial criteria first and foremost. That is like the number one gateway. It's the easiest thing from a fill out the form kind of scenario, because at the end of the day, that's our first gate to say you're qualified. For us, we're very, very specific and very picky, which is funny because most emerging brands, I'm fortunate to have, good support at the financial level. So we're able to be very picky about who we're allowing into the brand, but it's the financial side of things first.
Thank you.
So for us, Keith, our investment level for most of our brands is 100 or less. And so our criteria for quality is engagement, that the person inquired and we were able to engage with them that they're a real person and they have interest in exploring our opportunities. So ours is a little bit less about the financial side, more about the engagement side.
Thank you. And Sean, while you have the podium here, we heard from Tim what his cost per lead was $100, if I'm not mistaken. For you, Sean, what is your average cost per lead by social channels that are being utilized?
Ours is a lot less. Ours is, roughly $50 to $60, which I think is pretty standard in the industry. But again, comparing apples to apples, our investment level is very low. And so our engagement is going to be much different. If you're a brick and mortar, it's going to be a lot higher. So I think there's a lot of variables. Again, when people look at marketing, social, all those things, they try to, like, especially in the franchising industry, they kind of lump everybody together and like, oh, our average cost per lead is great, but like, I know that we're going to get a lot more engagement because our investment level is so much lower. And plus we're not brick and mortar and people are maybe, those type of things. So all those things play into effect. It's really looking at your baseline. What my recommendation is not look at what everybody else is necessarily doing. Take your baseline or what you've been doing and try to make improvements to it. And that's the best way, my kind of recommendation from that standpoint. And lastly, like Tim touched on this as well, is having a realistic budget for franchise development. The one thing I'll say is pretty consistent is most deals are expensive from a marketing perspective, and understanding your cost per deal and using industry statistics is roughly $10,000. So if you want to do 20 deals, your budget should be $200,000. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who say, I need to do 40 deals this year. And you ask them, okay, well, what have you budgeted? And they say about $30,000 to $40,000. Is like, not saying this can't be done, but it's very, very hard. You better have one compelling story, that a brand that sells itself.
Right.
Yeah. So somebody who in our audience last time around asked the question, what is the amount of ad spends that you're using? And that basically maybe a recommendation, because this particular individual said he's trying to create a budget for his CEO to approve. So maybe you can also talk about where and how you get that through. I mean, it's easy for you now, Tim, because you've got proof of concept, you've got demonstrated ROI. But how did each of you basically make the case? Did you up your sales goals and made commitments for higher outcomes, Tim?
Yeah, I used almost exactly the formula Sean just said. I went to my board and I said, if you want 10 deals, I need $100,000. And I got $100,000. Now, the problem with that was I then did 22 deals. And so I shot myself in the foot the next year from a budget perspective, but then it came in, when you have a good partner, they're able to help you achieve that anyways. But I think there's a lot of industry statistics that are out there. Sean made a really good point. Be careful to not get lumped into everybody. But networking is the first way that I would get after that. If I'm writing from scratch, brand new, no run rates, no data, I would do some networking on what some average cost per deals are, and then I would multiply out my deals, and I'd add a little buffer on top of it too. Yes,
thank you for sharing. Let's go to placements and targeting here for a moment. We had a question, how much retargeting should be a part of your average advertising budget? Jen, how would you answer that question?
Well, I guess I don't think you can max out retargeting, quite frankly. It's some of the most inexpensive, it's the most inexpensive way to get a lead. And so most of the time.
Let's stop there for a moment. For those in the audience that may not know what retargeting is, what's the definition?
Yeah, so if someone has come to your website, it basically essentially sets a pixel that's tied to that individual so that as they go out into the internet, however they choose to do it, whether it's back on Facebook or LinkedIn or even on display, we can then serve up an ad to that individual knowing that they've been on the site. So it's really a way to follow them post and with your website. And you can set up what the criteria of how much engagement is considered to be worthy of retargeting to go out to them. And you can set it for a duration of time. So maybe you don't want it to be for weeks on end or certain cadences. So you also don't want to be annoying. But in the end of the day, the idea is that I went to the site, I see an ad for Wawa as an example. Now that I'm back on Facebook, that reminds me of the franchise opportunity because I was on the franchise site. Typically, the ratio of prospecting versus remarketing when you allocate budget for a channel like Facebook, probably 80%. I don't know the exact number, but 80 to 90% is probably in prospecting and only 10% has to be spent in remarketing. And it's just a way of setting up the campaign so then it allocates budget.
Thank you. Do any one of you utilize Instagram?
I use Instagram heavily on the consumer side, but I do not utilize it for franchise development because that, again, for my specific brand, is Facebook has shown to be where my audience is looking for business opportunities, where my audience on Instagram is at a much different demographic and is absolutely aligned to my consumer. I think we spoke a little bit about this before. This goes with all channels, right? The biggest up and comer right now is TikTok, but the average age of the user on TikTok is 13. So that's not a decision maker. So I wouldn't spend the money at that one. And so for my brand specifically, Instagram is not that.
Very good. It'd be interesting to watch in the Q&A section if we do have any of our attendees that are having a success with TikTok or Instagram for that matter. These would seem to be sites that are visually oriented. So maybe I could ask you, Sean, for starters, are you using videos in your social campaigns?
Yes, we're definitely, well, it gets pretty broad when you start looking at video because it's, utilizing YouTube channel, remarketing, and then paid. But we're using a lot in remarketing. We're using it more in paid, mainly because just the user is more used to seeing video versus pictures. So, images were very effective years ago. Now engagement is much better with video. And so we're beginning to see more and more of that. So yes, I think that is if it's all in your progression of where you are in your social media. And if you haven't been on it, get on it and utilize it the right way. And then there's the whole 201, 301. And, we were talking about remarketing and Jen was talking about remarketing. And I hope that all the brands are already some level of remarketing because that's just, the best money spent. It's funny is that, paid say PPC is expensive. It's in the dollars, if not more, tens of dollars. Whereas remarketing is, a fraction of the cost, but that's someone who's already been to your website and you're marketing to an audience that's familiar with it. So it's the best money spent, but then taking it to the next level, it's just not just hitting them with the same buy my franchise ads. If they land on on a certain page, let's say it's your cost of franchising and maybe, cost to get into franchising or your investment costs. Well, maybe you remarket them with, hey, by the way, True Blue has special financing options for those interested in investing. So now you're catering the content to the behaviors where they're on your site, or they land on different content on your pages that then you can speak to them about it. And so that's where I think brands need to utilize that opportunity of that catering content to their audience and utilizing social. And again, it's how you use it. And I think if you're using the right messaging, content, and channels, you're going to have good success. It's not just plug and play.
Thank you. On the topic of targeting, do you market towards people that love your brand or more towards those that demographically would make a great franchisee candidate? And let me go ahead and turn to you, Jen, on that one.
Well, I think you should always choose the targeting of a good franchise candidate, which could happen to be your brand fan. So essentially define what makes a good candidate and then create a profile around that and then target specifically to that audience and what they're using in terms of how they interact on the internet or otherwise or outside, could be traditional channels. But in the end of the day, it's always best to start with the ideal candidate because that's how you get that quality percentage that Tim has, is because you're targeting right to begin with and you're not wasting your ad dollars.
Yes, that would make sense. Another question that we're carrying over from the last webinar has to do with forums. Do you find that the built-in lead generation form in Facebook is better, or directing leads to a landing page?
My advice is run from the forum.
Yes.
You're going to drive your sales department crazy.
Mhm.
There's a lot of false clicks. So again, I think for us, and we've done both, and the forum was a disaster for us, but we use it as a top funnel, drive awareness to your website to help them get engaged, to learn about your brand, and then lead it to to them filling out your form on your website. But that's our experience.
Thank you. Jen, it sounded like you were in alignment.
Yes, you'll be chasing leads forever. It's not worth it. It's better to control the narrative by sending them to your own content.
Okay, thank you. Another question came in on the topic of content development. We'll stay there for a minute. That's so important. The question was, what are the most effective image and copy options we should consider?
So for us, to me, it's smiling faces of successful franchisees, whether it's an image, a video, or their story.
Yeah.
So successful franchise stories sell franchises more than any compelling business argument you can make. So that's what I would kind of suggest from that standpoint, from a content wise.
Yes.
Especially in remarketing, like people want to envision themselves being that person that that feels like me, and I could see myself doing that. So I think it's very, very important to show people.
Yeah, and I echo both sentiments completely. The only thing I would add is, what your best in class franchisee looks like right now, as well as what your future best in class want to be. I would look at your internal franchise candidates and make sure you're presenting, and this is brand specific for me, the diversity that you want to build for your network, right? So you want to have different folks to be highlighting and keep it fresh and rotate it, because as to both Sean and Jen's point, we want candidates to see themselves in the person that they see online.
Tim, I want to stay with you just for another moment here. Another question that came in is, this person said, do you believe that at least 3 points of contact should be made within 2 weeks or they die out? My question for you would be slightly modified. How many points of contact do you believe should be made over the duration of nurturing a candidate? So how many points of contact over what duration of time?
Well, let me first start off by saying I have a slightly different philosophy when it comes to dead leads, because I don't think that's a thing. And the reason I don't think dead leads are a thing is that every single person that comes in contact to your brand is going to be a customer one way or another, or a potential customer one way or another, either a customer coming through the front door or someone who's eventually building one and coming in through the back door. So I would start by saying that's something that's, pretty big for myself. I think immediacy is important. I will say that it's also very brand specific. We carry a very heavy Hawaiian aloha, we're on island time vibe in our brand, right? So we do an instant connection, but we do not over pressure, because we don't want to speak a different language than what our brand is, right? Now, I will say that when I was at Massage Envy, although that sounds like something that should be very relaxing as well, the business person that was involved was very, very different. Not every franchisee was necessarily a consumer, where in my current brand, all of my franchisees are heavy on the consumer side. So to get back to your question, I think the initial point of contact needs to be very quick. I think that needs to be within 24 hours. Obviously, if someone's is kicking the can at midnight, we're not going to text them at midnight, because then you're expecting that to be real. And if it's not real, authenticity goes out the window, and then that's a problem. But I think within 24 hours is absolutely critical. And then having the ability to formulate a really good drip campaign on how you're going to do that. Well, obviously, we utilize FranConnect, which allows us to keep leads, healthy connection with those leads from the minute they fill out the form and then keep them as for the lifetime until they unsubscribe. And the reason I say I don't like the dead lead mentality, I literally closed the deal 2 weeks ago for a gentleman in Prosper, Texas that took 18 months. And now that's not 18 months of us calling every day and us, putting in all this massive amount of work. No, it was literally a phone call in the first 24 hours. And that initial point of contact left a residual feeling to that candidate that when he was actually ready, he didn't go to all of my competitors. He came right back to my franchise development guy. And we got a deal done 18 months later.
Awesome. And is there a different approach in social media for franchisors that require a higher initial investment, such as 800,000 or more versus a smaller initial investment of around 300,000? And this is a brand that advertises both on the consumer side and franchise recruitment side, often on the same ad platforms. So let's just tackle the first part of that. Is there a different approach for franchisors that require higher initial investments? And so let me go to you, Sean, on that one.
I would say yes. I just think it's understanding who your buyer is. And like for us, we're a lower investment. So we're more likely to get a candidate. This is the first time they've ever explored owning their own business. So that's a different candidate. If it's a high investment, looking at buying a restaurant, that's a sophisticated buyer. And so the sophisticated buyer is going to be obviously more geared towards ROI, investment, financial. Whereas our brands, first-time buyers looking at their drivers are owning a business, independent, very emotional. And so that's why social media is great for us for that reason.
Yes, thank you. Awesome answer. There's never enough time. We had more questions coming in this time around, so we'll probably put a blog out shortly with if the panelists are kind enough to answer offline some of those questions. And I want to thank our panelists so much again. Jen, starting with you, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, how do they do so?
I guess the easiest way would be an email, and it's J Campbell at hotdishad.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to talk to you. And
Tim, how would anyone get in touch with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's easy, unless you try to sell me something that I probably don't answer. However, if LinkedIn is not your channel of choice, email me at tim@wwlem.com. So that's tim@wwlem.com.
Okay, and Sean.
I'm going to go with LinkedIn as well. It's the best way to reach me. It's Sean Fitzgerald. I think my name is up on the screen, so it's spelled SEAN. But if you would like to email me, it's long. So it's S Fitzgerald, and then it's at truebluehousecare.com, and the true has no E. So it's TRU.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. I also would like to remind our audience that, as you can see, this is not a selling event. This is a thought leadership event, which we're all about. And I want you to know that we have the following dates of webinars that are coming up. We've got the CEO, Charles Watson of Tropical Smoothie Cafe, and Barb Nuss of Profit Soup, talking about zig-zag franchisee profitability strategies to straddle inflation and recession. A mouthful, but this is going to be a real how-to. And then October 16th, for those of you on the development side, best practices in accomplishing franchise resales. And of course, if you want any information on FranConnect, right there, FranConnect.com, request a demo. But I want to thank everybody again, and also the audience. Amazing just how you are devoted to continuous growth and improvement. I so respect that. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And we appreciate your coming again for this webinar today.